On the afternoon of September 4th, 1964, Donald Shrum set out on a hunting adventure with friends in Cisco Grove, California. Cisco Grove is a small community that resides in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountain range in the Tahoe National Forest. Donald was an experienced hunter, and the group planned on hunting deer only with bow and arrow. In the early afternoon, the group separated and spread out in the woods, planning to meet back at the campsite before it fell dark. As the afternoon progressed, Donald would go way off course, searching for a deer. Little did he know that he had gone quite astray. As nighttime fell, he was far from base camp and decided to spend the night in a tree in order to avoid predators. That night, a predator did come, but it was unlike anything he could have ever imagined. In this episode, we will examine Donald Shrum's 1964 strange and terrifying alien encounter. On the night of September 4th, 1964, armed with just a bow and arrow, 26-year-old Donald Shrum scaled a tree with the intention of sleeping the night there and heading back to camp once daytime arrived. Donald hadn't spotted any deer earlier in that day, which he thought was somewhat strange. As he sat, buckled to the tree, Donald would notice a white light soon hovering above them. It was zigzagging at a low altitude just over the treetops. Initially, Donald believed that it was a rescue helicopter and that his friends, concerned he hadn't returned to camp, reported him missing. Donald decided to try and draw attention to the white light by lighting a flare. After several flares, the white light drastically turned and started heading toward him. He climbed down the tree, and the craft stopped around 50 yards from the tree. Donald realized then it was making no noise, and this was not a helicopter. He quickly ascended the tree in order to hide. The craft was big, around 150 feet long, dark-colored and cigar-shaped. A portal opened up on it, and a smaller, silver-colored craft descended to the trees. Donald remained as still as possible in the tree, attempting to stay hidden. After around 5 minutes, he saw two beings walking through the woods. They wore tight silver suits, were around 45 feet tall, and humanoid. They began collecting soil samples, and Donald, who was around 15 feet in the air, remained hidden. Then, as the beings were walking away from him, accidentally Donald moved in the tree. Some twigs snapped, and the beings heard the noise. They turned around, looked upward, and spotted Donald. They made some type of strange noise, and soon Donald would hear a third being approach. This one was different and appeared to be a robot, not biological. The torso was box-shaped, the legs and arms looked made of metal, and the head was square. The robot had red eyes and approached the base of the tree along with the two humanoids. The beings tried shaking the tree to knock Donald down, but were unsuccessful. After this failed, the robot looked up toward Donald, opened its jaws, and a white mist flew out from its mouth. Donald tried his best to avoid the mist, but he inhaled it, and it paralyzed him. In a few moments' time, he passed out, buckled to the tree. He woke up and felt nauseous, and the beings were still down below the tree. As he regained his strength, he shot an arrow directly in the chest of the robot, causing sparks to fly everywhere. The three beings backed off and retreated away from the base of the tree. They then began approaching again, and Donald would shoot another arrow at the robot, striking it once again. At this point, the beings continued to try and attack Donald throughout the night. The robot continued spewing the white vapor, and it knocked Donald out again and again. Each time he awoke, the beings were closer and trying to get him down from the tree. Donald continued to fire arrows. Once he ran out, he started to throw things at the beings. He started lighting his clothing on fire and dropping it on them to discourage them. This fight went on all night. Then, with only a few hours left, Donald was struggling. The beings were still relentlessly attacking, yet he was exhausted. More beings had came and gone throughout the night, and Donald was forced to fend them off by any means necessary. Not only was he exhausted, but with much of his clothing burned, he was freezing. He would pass out once more. Donald then woke up to the sun rising, and the beings were all gone. He scaled down the tree and used his compass to get him back to base camp. He arrived and was exhausted. He told his friends what had happened, and they believed him, as one of the other hunters had seen the larger craft while he was out. Once Donald got home, he told his wife and a few others. Word would reach the Air Force, who came and interviewed Donald. The interview was very secretive, but the agent seemed very interested in the story. Still, nothing came from the matter, and it was closed by the Air Force as something explainable. Donald would suffer from PTSD for years after the event. He was unable to tell his story because he worked at a top-secret missile facility. Regardless, he eventually lost his job due to the stress of the event. Donald decided to tell his story years later. In 2011, he would write a book about his experience. In the book, Aliens in the Woods, the Cisco Grove Encounter. The book details the 12-hour fight that endured between him and the aliens. Still, it's important to point out that prior to Donald publishing the book, this case was investigated by several ufologists who deemed Donald to be credible. In addition, they verified the other hunter spotted the craft that night as well. This helps the credibility of the case, although there are certainly some questionable aspects. First, there was only one witness to the fight. A second weakness concerns the behavior of the beings and the story in general. For example, how are advanced beings unable to knock down a tree? This is an interesting question, and it's tough to imagine with advanced technology they couldn't knock it down. It could be the case, though, they weren't familiar with the material. They were collecting evidence of the soil and the surrounding area in tubes. In addition, it might be they needed him alive or wanted him alive, and they thought cutting down the tree might kill him. Another criticism has to do with the fight itself. It's tough to imagine they couldn't have taken Donald. We've seen many alien abduction cases where the beings come in locked homes. In most alien abduction cases, the beings are able to take the abductees with little effort. Once again, though, their mindset might have stopped them from doing this. They almost surely wanted to get Donald alive. Donald, by all accounts, has been said to be a credible individual. His story was somewhat backed up by another witness seeing the craft. While we'll never know for sure what happened that day, this is surely a fascinating story that might give one pause before heading out into the woods.